The old mansion stood perched on the cliffside, a monolithic shadow against the bruised twilight sky. Its Gothic spires and weathered stone walls whispered tales of forgotten opulence and lingering sorrow. Inside, dust motes danced in the slivers of moonlight that pierced through the tall, arched windows, illuminating the vast emptiness of its grand halls. This was where Clara found herself, a silent observer in a world that felt centuries removed from her own. She was hired as the estate's new archivist, tasked with cataloging the sprawling, neglected library, a task that felt less like a job and more like a sacred duty to the ghosts that surely roamed these corridors. Clara moved with a quiet grace, her fingers tracing the spines of ancient tomes, each one a universe waiting to be rediscovered. Her life had always been one of quiet observation, of finding beauty in forgotten things. She possessed a gentle spirit, often mistook for fragility, but beneath it lay a resilient strength, a profound capacity for empathy that few ever saw. Her past was a tapestry woven with threads of quiet struggle, a childhood marked by absence and the constant hum of unspoken desires. Coming to Blackwood Manor felt like an escape, a chance to lose herself in stories that weren't her own, a refuge from the aching loneliness that had become her most constant companion. The air in the library was thick with the scent of aged paper and dried lavender, a comforting aroma that spoke of lives lived and narratives preserved. She worked diligently, hour after hour, sorting through yellowed manuscripts and leather-bound journals, her breath misting in the cool evening air. The silence of the house was absolute, broken only by the soft rustle of pages and the distant cry of a nocturnal bird. It was a silence that could either soothe or amplify one's innermost anxieties, and for Clara did a bit of both. It was a beautiful, isolating quiet. Then a sound. A faint, almost imperceptible melody drifted from the west wing, a melancholic piano piece that seemed to weep through the very stones of the house. It was a tune of profound sadness, yet imbued with an undeniable, raw beauty that captivated Clara instantly. Her heart, usually so guarded, felt a sudden, inexplicable pull. She had been told the master of the house, Elias Thorne, rarely visited, preferring his bustling city life. Yet, the music spoke of a soul deeply entrenched within these very walls, a soul brimming with a sorrow that resonated with her own unspoken grief. A quiet curiosity began to stir within her. She followed the sound, drawn by an invisible thread, her footsteps barely disturbing the dust on the polished marble floors. The music grew louder, more intricate, a symphony of heartbreak and longing. It led her to a grand drawing room, bathed in the soft glow of a single fireplace. And there he was, Elias Thorne. He was seated at a magnificent grand piano, his back to her, silhouetted by the flickering flames. His broad shoulders were hunched, his dark hair falling across his brow as his fingers danced across the keys with a devastating grace. Even from a distance, Clara could sense the immense power he exuded, a silent authority that filled the opulent room. But it wasn't just power she sensed. It was a profound, almost palpable sadness that emanated from him like a physical aura. His music was a window into a soul besieged by unseen demons. She stood frozen in the doorway, an intruder in a moment of raw, vulnerable artistry. She shouldn't have been there. She knew that. Yet, she couldn't tear herself away. His profile, now partially visible as he shifted, was chiseled, almost severe, yet softened by the intensity of his focus. There was a scar, faint but noticeable, just above his left eyebrow, a silent testament to some forgotten battle. His jaw was clenched, his expression etched with a familiar pain that mirrored the notes he conjured. He was a masterpiece of contradictions, formidable and fragile, remote and achingly present in his music. As the final, lingering note faded into the silence, Elias slowly lowered his hands, his head still bowed. Clara held her breath, fearing he would turn, fearing the intrusion she represented. But he didn't move for a long moment, lost in the echoes of his own melody. Then he let out a slow, heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He stood, finally, turning towards the doorway where she stood, illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. Their eyes met across the vast expanse of the room. His were a startling shade of storm gray, deep and intense, holding a turbulent depth that sent a shiver down Clara's spine. In that singular, breathtaking moment, time seemed to dissolve. It wasn't just a man and a woman meeting. It felt like two ancient souls, long separated, finally recognizing each other in the quiet desperation of the night. A spark ignited, unseen yet undeniable. His gaze was scrutinizing, piercing through her composure, seeing past the unassuming archivist to something deeper within her. A faint frown creased his brow, a silent question in his powerful eyes. Clara felt a blush creep up her neck, embarrassed to be caught, yet utterly unable to break contact. It was a gaze that promised both danger and an inexplicable sense of belonging, a forbidden warmth in the chill of the Blackwood night. He took a step towards her, then another, closing the distance between them with a predatory grace. "Who are you?" His voice was a low rumble, tinged with a roughness that sent another shiver through her. It wasn't accusatory, but rather a statement of profound surprise, as if he hadn't expected to find another living soul in his solitude. And in that question, Clara knew her quiet life at Blackwood Manor had just become infinitely more complicated. The silence had shattered. His question hung in the air, a delicate thread stretching between them. Clara's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat against the overwhelming presence of Elias Thorne. She felt small, exposed, yet remarkably unafraid. There was a strange comfort in his intensity, a silent invitation to something she couldn't yet name. "Clara Vance," she managed, her voice a soft murmur that felt amplified in the grand room. "The new archivist, Mr. Thorne." He studied her for another long moment, his gaze unwavering, dissecting. Clara felt a peculiar blend of vulnerability and defiance under his scrutiny. There was a flicker in his storm-gray eyes. Then, a softening that was barely perceptible, like a distant lightning strike. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar mask of stoic reserve. "I wasn't aware," he stated, his voice still low, but now devoid of the earlier surprise. He turned, moving towards a heavy oak desk laden with papers, his movements economical and precise. "You may continue your work." And just like that, the moment was over. Or so it seemed. Days bled into weeks. Clara returned to the library, to her quiet world of books and forgotten stories. Elias, however, became a more frequent, if elusive, presence. She would often find him in the library late at night, a solitary figure poring over ancient texts, his brow furrowed in concentration. He never spoke much, merely acknowledged her with a curt nod, or a brief, intense glance that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. But actions, unspoken gestures, began to bridge the chasm between them. He started leaving her small, almost imperceptible gifts, a rare edition of a beloved poet she had mentioned in passing, a cup of freshly brewed, perfectly sweetened tea appearing on her desk when she was deep in research, a shawl draped over her chair on a particularly chilly evening. Each act was a silent confession, a recognition of her presence, her needs, her very being. Clara, in turn, found herself leaving little notes for him, insights she gleaned from the archives that she thought might interest him, a gentle reminder of a book he had overlooked, or a small, pressed flower marking a passage she found particularly poignant. By day, distance. By night, truth. Their exchanges became a language of quiet gestures, of lingering glances across crowded bookshelves, of shared silences that were more profound than any conversation. They spoke of history, of philosophy, of art, rarely of themselves. Yet, through these shared intellectual landscapes, their souls began to intertwine. Clara discovered the depth of his intellect, the unexpected tenderness hidden beneath his formidable exterior. She saw the heavy burden he carried, the deep-seated melancholy that his music had first revealed. One evening, a storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within Clara's own heart. She was in the library, engrossed in a particularly challenging translation, when Elias entered, rain clinging to his dark hair, his presence filling the cavernous room. He walked directly to her, his usual reserve momentarily shattered. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it, laced with a genuine concern that disarmed her completely. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, as if to brush away an unseen tear. Clara looked up, her eyes wide, meeting his intense gaze. The unspoken longing between them was a tangible force, a silent scream in the tempestuous night. She felt an irresistible urge to lean into his touch, to seek solace in his strength. The world outside, with its rigid rules and societal expectations, seemed to fade into insignificance. All that mattered was the electricity that sparked between them, the undeniable truth of their connection. He lowered his hand, his jaw tightening, his internal battle playing out across his expressive features. "You shouldn't be here, Clara," he whispered, his voice thick with a regret that tore at her. This isn't fair to you." Her heart ached. She understood. She was merely the archivist, a woman of modest means and no social standing, while he was Elias Thorne, a man of immense wealth and influence, whose life was under constant public scrutiny. Their worlds were not meant to collide, much less intertwine. Their love, however nascent, was a transgression. One night, she found him by the grand piano again, playing the same melancholic tune. This time, however, he saw her immediately. He didn't stop playing. Instead, he beckoned her closer with a slight nod of his head. Clara approached, her steps hesitant, her heart aflutter. She stood beside him, listening, utterly captivated by the raw emotion pouring from his fingertips. When he finished, he turned to her, a rare, almost fragile smile gracing his lips. "You understand, don't you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The music, it speaks of things I cannot." Clara simply nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "It speaks of profound longing," she replied, her voice equally soft, "and a love that has known great sorrow." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. The touch was electric, tender, a silent promise. And in that moment, the barriers between them crumbled. Their lips met, tentative at first, then with a fierce, desperate hunger that consumed them both. It was a kiss born of unspoken words, of shared solitude, of a love that defied all logic and societal norms. It was a beautiful, dangerous precipice. Their secret world began, a stolen paradise within the cold stone walls of Blackwood Manor. Their meetings were clandestine, their affections hidden from the prying eyes of the few staff members and the ever-present specter of public opinion. Every touch, every stolen glance, every whispered word was infused with the thrill of the forbidden, the agonizing awareness that their happiness was built on shifting sand. Then came the news, delivered by a flurry of society pages and hushed whispers among the staff. Elias Thorne was engaged. To Lady Beatrice Ainsworth, a woman of impeccable lineage and undeniable beauty, a match deemed perfect by the elite circles they inhabited. The announcement was accompanied by a glossy photograph. Elias, looking impossibly distant, standing beside a radiant Beatrice, her hand linked through his arm. Clara saw the newspaper in the servants' lounge, her blood turning to ice. The world believed he loved someone else, and in that brutal moment, the true, agonizing cost of their secret love became devastatingly clear. The glossy image of Elias and Lady Beatrice stared up at Clara from the newspaper, a cruel testament to the chasm that separated their two worlds. The words blurred before her eyes, each syllable a hammer blow to her already fragile heart. Engaged. The formal announcement, the beaming smiles of society's darlings, all painted a picture of a life Elias was destined for, a life that could never include her. A cold dread seeped into her bones, chilling her to the core. Their secret paradise, built on stolen moments and whispered promises, now felt like a fragile glass house shattering around her. The sheer audacity of her hope, of their clandestine love, suddenly felt like a painful delusion. When Elias finally came to her, it was late that night, the mansion steeped in a suffocating silence. He found her in the library, not among the books, but by the large window overlooking the stormy sea, her gaze lost in the tumultuous waves. He approached silently, his presence a heavy weight in the room. Clara didn't need to turn to know he was there. The air itself crackled with his sorrow, his conflict. "Clara," he said, his voice raw, laced with an agonizing regret that tore at her. She turned slowly, her face a mask of carefully constructed composure, though her eyes betrayed the tempest raging within. "I know," she replied, her voice barely a whisper yet firm. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of profound frustration. "It's complicated." "Is it?" she challenged, a flicker of unexpected fire in her usually gentle gaze. Or is it simply the way of your world, Mr. Thorne? The title stung, a deliberate barrier she erected between them. Elias flinched, the pain in his eyes deepening. Clara, please. You must understand. My family, their legacy, it's a burden I cannot simply cast aside. He spoke of duty, of expectations, of a lineage that demanded sacrifice. She understood the words, but her heart refused to accept them. How could something so pure, so profound as what they shared, be deemed a sacrifice? And what of us, Elias? Her voice broke, the carefully constructed facade crumbling. Was that merely a fleeting indulgence? A secret to be tucked away when your real life called? His eyes widened, reflecting a raw anguish that mirrored her own. No, never. You are the truth, Clara. By day, distance. By night, truth. You are my truth. He moved closer, reaching for her, his touch a desperate plea. But Clara recoiled, the pain too sharp, too visceral. Truth that must hide in the shadows? Truth that must live in secrecy while the world believes you love someone else? A bitter laugh escaped her lips, hollow and heartbreaking. How can I be your truth, Elias, when you deny me to the world? The question hung heavy, unanswered, a chasm opening between them. Elias looked at her, his storm-gray eyes filled with a desperate plea, but no words came. He was trapped, caught between his inherited obligations and the forbidden love that had awakened his dormant soul. He was a powerful man, a titan in his world, yet in that moment he appeared utterly helpless. His silence was an answer in itself, a confirmation of her worst fears. The days that followed were a blur of exquisite agony. Elias tried to reach her, his unspoken pleas echoing through the desolate halls. He left notes, small gifts, tried to intercept her in the library. But Clara, in her hurt, in her desperate attempt to protect her shattered heart, kept her distance. She retreated further into herself, into the quiet solace of the books, seeking refuge from a reality too painful to bear. She witnessed his public appearances with Lady Beatrice. Photographs splashed across society pages. Beatrice was radiant, effortlessly elegant, perfectly suited to his world. Their smiles, though distant on Elias's part, spoke of a flawless union. And each image, each headline, was another dagger twist in Clara's soul. The betrayal wasn't malicious, but a betrayal nonetheless. A betrayal of a shared dream, a whispered promise. Then came the formal announcement of the wedding date, prominently displayed in the morning papers. Blackwood Manor was abuzz with preparations, with caterers and decorators, with the arrival of a renowned wedding planner. The very walls that had once cradled their secret love now echoed with the joyous anticipation of his marriage to another woman. It was a brutal, relentless assault on her senses, a constant reminder of what she had lost. One afternoon, Clara was in the garden, seeking a moment of peace among the wilting roses, when she overheard two maids gossiping. "Did you see Lady Beatrice's engagement ring? A family heirloom, they say. Absolutely dazzling. And so, he finally chose duty over, well, you know." The second maid lowered her voice conspiratorially, casting a quick glance around. "There were rumors, you know, about him and that quiet archivist. But I suppose a man like Mr. Thorne can't afford such indiscretions." The words struck Clara like a physical blow. The rumors. Her heart sank. Their secret wasn't as secret as she had believed. The world believed he loved someone else, but it also suspected a quiet truth. And now that truth was being casually dismissed, deemed an indiscretion, easily cast aside for the sake of appearances. That night, Elias found her packing her few belongings in her small attic room. Her hands trembled as she folded a worn dress. The air was thick with unspoken grief. "What are you doing?" His voice was strained, barely audible. Clara didn't turn. "I'm leaving, Elias." He moved to her, grabbing her arm gently, pulling her to face him. His eyes were desperate, pleading. "No, you can't. This is your home, Clara. You belong here." "I can't," she whispered, tears finally streaming down her face, blurring his anguished features. "I can't watch you marry her. I can't be your secret anymore. I can't live in the shadow of a love the world believes belongs to someone else." The truth in her words was undeniable, a sharp blade, severing the last thread between them. He stared at her, his face a mask of utter devastation, his shoulders slumping as if under an unbearable weight. He had no answer, no argument that could counter the profound logic of her pain. She pulled her arm away, the contact too agonizing to bear. "Goodbye, Elias." And with that, Clara turned her back on Blackwood Manor, on Elias Thorne, and on the shattered fragments of their forbidden love. She walked out into the cold, unforgiving night, leaving behind the only place she had ever felt truly seen, truly loved, carrying nothing but a broken heart and the bitter knowledge that some loves, no matter how profound, were simply not meant to be. The world outside Blackwood Manor was a blur of indifferent faces and relentless rain. Clara walked for hours, aimless and heartbroken, the chilling wind a mirror to the emptiness inside her. Every step away from the mansion felt like tearing a piece of her soul, yet staying had become an unbearable torture. She found a small, nondescript inn in a nearby town, a place where she could disappear, where her sorrow would go unnoticed. Days turned into weeks, marked only by the monotonous rhythm of her grief. She tried to find work, to build a new life, but her heart wasn't in it. Every sunset brought with it the crushing memory of stolen moments. Every passing melody reminded her of Elias's mournful piano. She read books, but the words blurred, failing to transport her from her own painful narrative. By day, distance. By night, truth. And her truth was an aching loneliness. Meanwhile, at Blackwood Manor, Elias Thorne was a ghost. The wedding preparations continued, a relentless march towards a future he no longer desired. Lady Beatrice moved through the grand halls, elegant and composed, oblivious to the silent turmoil raging within her fiancé. Elias fulfilled his duties, attended social engagements, played the part expected of him, but his eyes, once so intense, now held a haunted, desolate look. His music had fallen silent. The house, once filled with the echoes of his sorrowful melodies, was now truly empty. He searched for Clara, sending discreet inquiries, his desperation growing with each passing day. He had to find her, had to make her understand the impossible bind he was in, the weight of a legacy that threatened to crush him. He regretted his silence, his inability to fight for her, for them, in that agonizing last conversation. But his pride, his deeply ingrained sense of duty, had paralyzed him. The wedding day dawned, crisp and cold, mirroring the atmosphere within Blackwood Manor. Guests began to arrive, a dazzling display of society's elite, their laughter and chatter filling the air. The grand ballroom had been transformed, adorned with white roses and delicate silks, a picture of opulent perfection. Elias stood at the altar, beside a resplendent Lady Beatrice, his face a carefully blank canvas. His heart, however, was a storm of conflicting emotions, a desperate plea for something, anything, to stop the inevitable. Just as the officiant began to speak, a commotion rippled through the gathered guests. A figure stood at the grand entrance, disheveled and defiant, her eyes blazing with an intensity that silenced the room. It was Clara. She had heard about the wedding from a chance encounter with a former Blackwood staff member. Something inside her, a fierce, protective instinct, had compelled her to return. She didn't know what she would do, what she would say, but she couldn't let Elias make this ultimate sacrifice without fighting for the truth, for their truth. Elias's head snapped up, his eyes locking with hers across the stunned silence of the room. A gasp escaped his lips, a raw, involuntary sound of recognition and profound shock. His carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the desperate hope that had flickered within him all these weeks. Lady Beatrice, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, turned to follow Elias's gaze. Her eyes, usually so calm, narrowed as they fell upon Clara. A flicker of something akin to suspicion, then dawning comprehension, crossed her features. Clara walked down the aisle, her step slow but resolute, her gaze never leaving Elias's. The whispers grew louder, turning into murmurs of scandal and disbelief. Yet, she pressed on, driven by an unshakable conviction. She reached the foot of the altar, standing before the gathered congregation, before the man she loved and the woman he was about to marry. Elias, her voice rang out, clear and steady, cutting through the stunned silence. "Don't do this." Lady Beatrice, regaining her composure, stepped forward, her elegant smile fixed. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Who is this woman, Elias?" Her tone was sharp, betraying a hint of steel beneath her polished exterior. Elias, torn between his duty and the overwhelming presence of Clara, finally found his voice. "Beatrice, please." He turned to Clara, his eyes pleading, an unspoken dialogue passing between them. Clara knew she had to speak her truth, no matter the cost. "He loves me," she declared, her voice trembling now but firm. We are married." A collective gasp swept through the room. Murmurs erupted into outright exclamations. Lady Beatrice's perfect smile vanished, replaced by a look of shocked fury. "Married? This is an outrage," she exclaimed, turning to Elias, her voice rising. "What is the meaning of this, Elias? Is this some cruel joke?" Elias took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over the shocked faces, then finally settling on Clara, his eyes filled with a fierce determination. The years of hiding, of sacrificing his own happiness, culminated in this singular, pivotal moment. "It's true," he stated, his voice ringing with a newfound clarity, surprising even himself. "Clara is my wife." He reached out, taking Clara's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a powerful, public declaration that defied all expectations, all societal norms. The touch sent a jolt of hope through Clara, a confirmation that their love, though forbidden, was real, acknowledged. Lady Beatrice stared at them, her face paling, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She looked at Elias, then at Clara, then back at the bewildered faces of the guests. Without another word, she turned and, with as much dignity as she could muster, walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind a stunned silence. The room was a tableau of shock, but Elias and Clara stood together, their hands clasped, their eyes locked. The truth was out. The secret, no longer confined to the shadows, had burst forth into the light. It was messy, it was scandalous, it was everything society deemed improper. But it was real. A fragile hope began to bloom in Clara's heart, a tentative promise of a future they could now claim, openly and without fear. Elias looked at her, a faint, tender smile gracing his lips, his storm-gray eyes finally clear, finally at peace. The hardest decision had been made, the greatest risk taken. And in that raw, exposed moment, they stood together, ready to face whatever consequences their truth might bring. For the first time, Elias Thorne had chosen his heart. The aftermath of Clara's declaration was a whirlwind of scandal and societal uproar. The elite guests, initially stunned, quickly dissolved into a cacophony of whispers and outrage. The Thorne family, mortified, attempted to salvage what little dignity remained, but the truth, once unleashed, could not be contained. Elias, however, stood unyielding, his hand still clasping Clara's, his gaze fixed solely on her. In that chaotic moment, the world faded away. All that mattered was the raw, undeniable connection between them. The weeks that followed were a testament to their resilience. Elias faced the wrath of his family, the condemnation of society, and the relentless scrutiny of the press. He lost business deals, saw his reputation tarnished, and endured scathing public attacks. Yet, through it all, his resolve never wavered. He had made his choice, and he would stand by it. Clara, by his side, found a strength she never knew she possessed. The vulnerable archivist blossomed into a woman of quiet dignity and fierce loyalty. The judgment of strangers stung, but it was eclipsed by the profound joy of being openly acknowledged by the man she loved. They retreated to Blackwood Manor, seeking refuge from the storm, finding solace in the quiet solitude that had once defined their secret love. The old mansion, once a place of shadows and secrets, transformed. It became their sanctuary, a testament to a love that had defied all odds. They filled its silent halls with laughter, with shared stories, with the tender intimacy that had long been denied. Elias resumed playing the piano, but now his music was infused with a newfound lightness, a melody of hope and profound peace. Clara worked in the library, no longer just an archivist, but the mistress of the house, her gentle touch bringing order and warmth to every corner. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender, Elias found Clara by the same window where she had once gazed out, heartbroken. He approached her, his step silent, and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Are you happy, Clara?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She leaned into his embrace, a soft sigh escaping her lips. More than I ever dared to dream, Elias. She turned in his arms, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears, but tears of joy. You gave up so much for me. He gently cupped her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I didn't give up anything, my love. I gained everything. By day, distance. By night, truth. He smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that melted her heart. You are my truth, Clara. Always have been. Always will be. Their love story was a scandal, a cautionary tale whispered in gilded drawing rooms, but it was also a legend. A testament to the power of a love that refused to be silenced, that dared to break free from the suffocating chains of expectation and duty. They built their life together, not on inherited wealth or societal approval, but on the bedrock of genuine affection, shared understanding, and a courage born of pure love. They had found their redemption in each other, healing wounds that had festered for years. Elias, once haunted by a melancholic past, found lightness and joy in Clara's presence. Clara, once adrift and alone, found belonging and unwavering love in Elias. Their union was a defiant whisper against the roar of convention, a quiet revolution of the heart. Their story reminds us that love, in its purest form, often thrives in the most unexpected places, under the most challenging circumstances. It asks us to question the price of appearances, the cost of conformity, and the true value of a love that demands to be seen, to be heard, to be lived. For some loves are destined to bloom in the shadows, growing stronger in secrecy, until they are ready to burst forth and reclaim their rightful place in the light. And when they do, they prove that the most profound happiness is found not in adhering to the world's expectations, but in bravely embracing the truth of one's own heart. Their love was forbidden, but it was real. It was a secret, but it became their greatest strength. And in the quiet intimacy of Blackwood Manor, Clara, his secret wife, finally lived openly as the woman he truly loved, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are found when we dare to defy the world and listen to the unwavering call of our own souls. It was a love that transcended status, survived scandal, and ultimately redefined what it meant to be truly free.